Hello, this is Juliana Tu of Viva Escrow. Welcome to my continued series on fraud threats to the consumer. With this presentation, I would like to talk about one of the most public of all fraud threats, and that would be check fraud. Fraud is perpetuated by the fraudster, and this could be anyone, anywhere, and could be committing the crime at any time. But first, let's review some basics. What is the main function of escrow? The escrow holder or the settlement agent or the stakeholder, we are the impartial, neutral third party with whom funds and documents are held in trust until mutually agreed upon instructions have been met. What are our responsibilities? We handle the receipt in of funds to close and we send out proceeds of the sale. Now, the funds that come in can be in the form of checks, or they could be coming in the form of wires or even financial instruments like a seller carryback note. We also handle the transfer of documents and data in the file, and these can be given to us by paper form or through sending a document electronically. So when you go into escrow, the settlement agent takes responsibility for everything that is given to us, especially the money. So fraud perpetuated on the funds become a real problem. Let's talk a little bit about fraud. Wire fraud is the most worrisome these last few years, and this was the first presentation that I made on this series. Email fraud is the most prevalent. Those emails purported that come from someone you know asking you to open an attachment. Well, don't do it unless you do verify that it is from the person you know. Check fraud is the most public, and it is the subject of this presentation. Although the amounts may not be large, but writing a fake or NSF check to buy something happens all the time. Now, personal identity fraud is the most harmful because this is someone pretending to be you and taking out credit cards and doing harmful things to others in your name and destroying your credibility. So, what is check fraud? This is fraud that is perpetrated on the sale of goods and merchandise and property. When you have money from the purchase given in the form of personal checks or cashier's checks or official checks, and these checks do not have sufficient funds in it or are outright fake, then you have a fraud problem, especially when the goods or merchandise has already been given to this fraud perpetrator. Now, why? These fraudsters are not like fraudsters who do wire fraud and have the technological savvy behind them. These fraudsters are mostly small time crooks who, with spending only a little bit of expense and some time convincing the victim through text or email, can manage to make off with a few $1,000s here and there from unsuspecting victims. These unsuspecting victims can be sellers of the merchandise. It can be the settlement agent through an escrow transaction, but most important, it is the general public. Many times these are the older folks or folks who are of low income financially. It is all about making you believe what they say and selling you their story. They are con artists. Now, this is how they scam you. The seller has an item to sell. They put an ad or use one of those popular sites that offer a platform to sell. The item is usually not too expensive, perhaps in the mid hundreds, less than $1,000. The buyer contacts you via text or email, interested to buy. You're excited. He offers you a full price. He tells you that he's even willing to add a little bit more so that you don't sell it to somebody else. He wants you to help him ship it to him out of state, and he is willing to pay the shipping cost added onto it. So what happens is that the buyer will then go ahead, send you a bank official check or a cashier's check and the instructions to deposit it. and then asks you to arrange the shipping and give the balance that is not used back to him. The seller then goes ahead and deposits this check, and after a few days to clear the check, he arranges to send out the merchandise and, after deducting the shipping charges, returns any amounts that are not used to this buyer. The problem is that most of the general public may be inexperienced as to how the check clears. In addition, this is an official check or a cashier's check, isn't it? That should clear in a week or so at the most. But actually, it really takes 15 to 20 days to send notification to the depositor that the check was fraudulent. By that time, the seller finds out that the check is a fraudulent check. He is out the money that he refunded to the buyer. He is out the money that he paid to ship the merchandise, and he is going to be out the merchandise itself. This happened to me, and because of this experience, I wrote a check fraud article that is now posted on our website. And I'm following up with this video presentation. If I had fallen for the scam, I would have lost about $1,900 in cash plus the item, which I was selling only for $600. I don't want this to happen to any of the unsuspecting public, as it is my understanding that many of those that are targeted are the elderly and the low income people. So, how is a settlement agent scammed? Here's an example. We ask the buyer for his final down payment to close escrow. He gives us a cashier's check. Now, according to California's good funds law, funds from a cashier's check is supposedly good to be used the next business day after it is deposited. So, the transaction closes 2 days after the funds are deposited, and then the funds are dispersed out together with the seller's proceeds. 10 to 15 days later, notification is received that this particular cashier's check is a fake. Now, the settlement agent's trust account is short. The shortage has to be replaced immediately. The settlement agent shells out the shortage from their own pocket. Meanwhile, they are trying to track down the buyer and file criminal proceedings. So, what can we do to prevent check fraud from happening to us? For the seller of the merchandise and the general public, here is what you should do. Question all inquiries. Don't take them at face value. After you negotiate an amount for the sale, ask them for cash. Ask them to pick up at your location and give you this cash. If you must take a check, call the paying bank and try to find out if this check is good. If they won't verify for you, and most banks won't, wait at least 15 to 20 days before you release the merchandise. For the settlement agent, be sure you do not take any personal checks to close escrow. Sometimes the amount needed is only a couple $100s or a couple $1,000s. Do you take a personal check? Well, this is a management decision. What is your company's what is your company's appetite for risk? Can you afford losing this couple $100s or couple $1,000s in case the check is fraudulent? If you do take a cashier's check to close, tell your client that you need it at least 5 business days in advance, more if it is an out-of-state check. Notify your bank. Ask them to run the cashier's check to see if it appears on any fraud alert list. The banking industry do have these alerts. If you become a victim, keep copies of everything as proof. Report it to your local law enforcement so that they can open a file on this fraudster. Perhaps there's already a file open on him, and what you can provide may help catch him sooner. If this is a large amount, notify the FBI also. Here are some tips for you to take home. Trust no one. Question everything. And do not be rushed. This crook will want to rush you to make the deposit, rush you to send him the refund check, and finally trust your gut instinct. Be sure you check out our general public check fraud article at the link here. We also have a check fraud in a real estate transaction article at this other link. They will have more in-depth description of the types of check frauds that we have encountered. We have other articles not only on other types of fraud, but other educational material on the site. Thank you, and I hope that you have found this presentation helpful. Be sure to pass it on to others who may benefit. Remember, if you have questions, we have the answers. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and for being aware of fraud.